Timestamps are in the description if you want to skip to a certain topic. Graphs are drawn with a set of two axes, the horizontal axis being the x-axis and the vertical axis being the y-axis. To remember this, imagine the tail of the y hanging down vertically, and that is your y-axis. Coordinates are given in brackets in the form x and then y. If you are given the coordinate 2 and 4, your x value is 2 and your y value is 4. Go along these lines and the point where they intersect, that is your coordinate 2 and 4. The same with negative 2 and 2. It will be since negative for x is on the left hand side and negative y is at the bottom. We are going to join these two coordinates and we are going to determine the midpoint of these two coordinates. You basically take the average of the two coordinates. So the midpoint formula is x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2. I'm going to label the negative 2 and 2 coordinate as x1 and y1 and the 2 and 4 coordinate as x2 and y2. It doesn't matter which coordinate you choose as your first or second, you will get the same answer. Substitute your values into this formula and calculate. Your midpoint will then be the coordinate 0 and 3, which will be here on the graph. To calculate the distance between two coordinates, we use a Pythagorean-like formula that looks like this. It basically makes a right angle triangle and the hypotenuse will be your distance. You can choose any of the two coordinates as your first or second coordinate. You will get the same answer. Substitute your values into this distance formula. 2 minus 2 is 2 plus 2, which is 4. And 4 minus 2 is 2. 4 squared is 16 and 2 squared is 4. And these two values added together will give you 20. Square root 20 can be simplified to 2 square root 5. You can get this value by typing square root 20 into your calculator. Now moving on to the gradient. We use the symbol m for gradient. We can think of the gradient in several ways. One is the rise over run of the graph, where we look at how many units the graph rises over how many units the graph runs to a side. This can be expressed as the change in y over the change in x. Change is denoted by the triangle here. These two coordinates has a rise of 2 and a horizontal run of 4. So the gradient will be 2 over 4, which simplifies to a half. To use the change in formula, choose a coordinate as your first and the other one as your second. Yet again, it doesn't matter which one is your first one and which one is your second one. You will get the same answer. The formula expands to this and then substitute your values into this formula. You will get 2 over 4 and that simplifies to a half, which is the same that we got for the rise over run method. A gradient of a half will look like this. It doesn't matter where it cuts the y-axis. As your gradient increases, it will change like so, becoming more steep. And when it's negative, it looks like this. When two lines are parallel, that means that their gradients are the same and they never intersect. Here's an example of parallel lines. When two lines are perpendicular, then the angle that the intersection makes is 90 degrees. When you want to find a perpendicular line's gradient, you have to know this formula. The product of the two perpendicular gradients should be equal to -1. So here we want to find the perpendicular gradient of the other gradient, which is 2. Substitute 2 into this formula, then divide both sides by 2 to isolate the m2 gradient, and then you get your answer. The perpendicular gradient of the orange line is -1/2. The equation of a straight line or function is in the form y equals mx plus c, where y is your corresponding y value, m is your gradient, x is your corresponding x value, and c is your y-axis intercept, or where it cuts the vertical axis. You can think of C as a slider, where it shifts the line up or down, like shown here when C is positive 2, 0, or negative 2. The question: find the equation of the line that goes through these two coordinates. You can label these two coordinates as -2 and 0, and the other 0 and -1. Since two coordinates joined together makes a straight line, we know that we can work with the equation y equals mx plus c. We have the x-axis intercept, which is -1, so our c will be -1. Now we just need to calculate the gradient m. M is the change in y over the change in x. Here, I chose -2 and 0 as my first coordinate, but either one can be your first coordinate. You will get the same answer. Plug your values into the formula and you will get your gradient. M is equal to -1/2. Thus you have all the information needed to write down the straight line equation. Y is equal to -1/2 x minus 1. Now this question is a bit more tricky, but if you break it down, you'll be able to do it. Find the equation of the line that is perpendicular to y equals 3x minus 2 and goes through the point -6 and 4. Since our answer is going to be a straight line, we can work with the formula y equals mx plus c. We can start off by drawing the line y equals 3x minus 2. The y-axis intercept, which is c, is -2. So we have one coordinate so far, which is 0 and -2. For the other coordinate, I'm going to find the x-axis intercept. And how you find that is by making the y value 0 in your equation. Add 2 to both sides and then divide the equation by 3 to isolate your x value. Then x will be equal to 2/3. Now we have two coordinates, so we can draw our line. Now, it is said that the other line is perpendicular to this line, y equals 3x minus 2. So we can use the perpendicular gradients formula. The product of the two gradients should give you -1. Divide both sides by 3 and your second gradient is -1/3. Now we have the perpendicular gradient. Now we just need to find the value of c where this gradient goes through the coordinate -6 and 4 as stated in the question. Write down your incomplete new line formula and substitute these values for x and y into this equation. Then solve for c. -1/3 times -6 is 2. Then subtract 2 from both sides and there you have your answer for c. C is equal to 2. Now we have our perpendicular gradient and its y-axis intercept, or c, so we can write down the formula. Y is equal to -1/3x plus 2. Another question they can ask you is to calculate the intersection point of these two lines. Now you just make the two equations equal to each other and solve for x. Add 1/3x to both sides and add 2 to both sides. Then divide your equation by 10/3 and your x value is 6/5. Substitute this x value into any one of the two equations. You will get the same answer for both. I'm going to use the second formula because it looks easier. 3 times 6/5 minus 2 is 8/5 and that is your y value. So when your two equations are equal to each other, the x value is 1.2 and your y value is 1.6, which is then your point of intersection as shown here. Thank you for watching and I hope you understand straight line graphs a bit better now. Good luck on your math journey.